friends. Welcome to 5x5 with CompStak. I'm your host, Brian Caldwell, and today we've got an exciting episode on the hot topic of data centers. Our guest today is Ryan Atkinson from JLL in the Bay Area. Before we get in the conversation with Ryan, let's take a look at the pulse check, which highlights some of CompStak data on data centers. So looking at AI office leasing growth in the Bay Area, AI firms made up 8.5% of office leasing in 2024, which is up from 6.3% in the prior year. It's dipped a little bit in 2025, down to 4.5%, but still above pre-2023 levels. Taking a look at CompStak's data on the largest owners of data centers, we've got Digital Realty Trust, Equinix, and GI Partners. Of course, we'll have Ryan chime in on those in a little bit here. And lastly, taking a look at NCREIF's expanded property index, data centers posted the second highest one-year return in Q1 of 2025, trailing only manufactured housing. Cool. Ryan, welcome to the show here. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm doing great. End of summer, kids are back in school. That's a good thing for all of us parents.
I'm sure. I've got a newborn at home, so it'll be a few years it'll be a few years before I get there, but looking forward to it for sure. So, great, Ryan. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your business around data centers, and then we'll get into some of your analysis.
Perfect. First, great. Thanks for having me. I've known CompStak for a few years and interface with you guys online and offline. So appreciate the service. My name obviously is Ryan Atkinson. I work for Jones Lang LaSalle, JLL in the Silicon Valley. I have been with JLL for 18 or 19 years, I believe. And my first data center project was 2010 or 11. The market has wildly changed since 2010 or 11 in a number of ways. I'm sure we'll hit on a lot of them. But it is a dynamic, interesting sector of the market that frankly is on a runway that, if projections come true, is going to sort of drastically change the way we look at real estate and sort of AI capabilities across the board for the United States and frankly the world.
Yep. I think all of us in some way, shape, or form are using an AI platform in our day-to-day work. I know I certainly do, and we do at CompStak quite a bit. So we know that that's driving demand for data centers, and looking forward to getting your insights on the property type. Which we'll start with your opinion on tailwinds and headwinds that are affecting data centers right now, if you want to give us a few of each.
Well, the biggest headwind for sure, and this we'll probably hit on this many times, is just frankly the power availability in the United States and just the access to power, where there's extra power, where extra capacity can be built. And frankly, it's driving real estate decisions for data center operators. It's a power first equation as opposed to a real estate first equation. I'd say secondly, the supply chain is challenged. Just the technological advances, the chips and the servers that we talk so much about and we hear so much about in the news. They are powerful machines. They need all types of services to cool them, to keep them, functioning. The air conditioning solutions constantly need to be upgraded. So that just the supply chain and the technological challenges within the facilities have become a little bit of a headwind. I think also just the time. Another headwind is the timeline to construct these facilities, where to take them, the local regulations, the local challenges, how to build them quickly, and to get them up online for the users, because there is demand for facilities today that can't be fulfilled. In terms of tailwinds, I think the biggest thing we touched on a little bit ago is just the national acceptance of AI, and it's in the discourse, it's in the zeitgeist of what we're hearing every day in the news, and I don't think we can shove it back in the bottle. So it's gonna continue. From our use of ChatGPT in the offices, a lot of people touch it today, to more advanced uses and AI agents, and the next level of technology that's coming is just going to take more and more computers. So we're being driven by the market. The expansion of data centers and their uses are being driven by business and frankly are becoming a very large part of any business model for young or established companies. There's a lot of investment coming into the sector, so another tailwind. There's a lot of money chasing the returns that you just mentioned a bit ago. So there's institutional investors and the large groups that are coming to the front to fund these facilities. And I think just the general ethic is everyone wants to be a piece of AI. And in my real estate function, we use AI more than we have to review leases and to review content, and it's just pervasive across the board as we look at companies growing. So the biggest tailwind of all is just the common acceptance of AI into our national sort of business platform.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned reviewing leases. I had ChatGPT review a lease I have for a rental unit last night, and kind of I had an old version of it that was prepared by an attorney, and then I had ChatGPT look at kind of an abridged version. So interesting. I think a lot of folks are using it very practically day to day on a regular basis. So let's next talk about your market outlook for the sector. We'll call it, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months.
Well, specific, I can talk to the national picture and the Silicon Valley. The Silicon Valley is, I think, a little bit of a microcosm of what we're looking at on a national basis, but it's just more acute. Essentially, power availability in the Silicon Valley has been shut off. So there's two main providers. There's the provider called SVP Power, which is serves all of Santa Clara, and then there's PG&E Power, which serves the greater part of the rest of the state. And they don't have access to more power for users for the next, anyone's guess, 5 to 10 years for large scale deployment or data center development. So the projects underway in the Silicon Valley are few and far between, which has led, again, we were talking about this power-driven requirement, which has led people to look to other locations across the country. Where is there this power availability? Where can I build? Where can I get power? But secondarily, it's also looked at, we talked about this a little bit, Brian, beforehand. How do we bring power to sites that maybe isn't on the grid? So maybe it's off the grid solutions. Maybe it's small nuclear facilities. Maybe it's fuel engines, fuel cell technology, the Bloom Energies of the world. How do we put power into a site that isn't served by the grid? Renewable resources as well, obviously, the wind power and the solar power and those type of things, which have their own challenges in the data center world. But where can we bring power? So in California, we're sort of hamstrung, but there are locations across the country where we're seeing large growth of facilities, mostly based on power availability.
Gotcha. And so I was thumbing through the JLL data center report, and I saw that there's 8 regions in the United States that are, generally regarded as data center regions. So you've got Northern Virginia with 4,900 megawatt capacity. You've got Dallas, Fort Worth with a little over almost 1,200 megawatt capacity. The Pacific Northwest at 900, almost 1,000. Atlanta, where I'm based, at just over 900. We've got Chicago at 866. Northern California at 810. Phoenix at 800, and the Austin, San Antonio area at 650 megawatts. So talk to us a little bit about the regions and maybe some nuances between them for future development. I know you mentioned that Northern California is kind of currently hamstrung now with power availability.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. So there are historically large markets, and you hit on most all of them there. We shameless plug, JLL just released our second half market review for data centers. We have the current national inventory at 15.5 gigawatts, and this is the big number. The planned pipeline of data center development is an additional 31.6 gigawatts. So we're looking at effectively tripling the current national supply as the planned pipeline. So when you mention the markets that you just went through, were the historic major markets, the Northern Californias, the Northern Virginias, the Chicagos, the Dallases, what has happened is as those markets have become saturated, users, the hyperscalers, which are essentially the big users, have gone anywhere they can to find power. So we've seen secondary and tertiary markets really show up on the national landscape. because there maybe is historical industry in those locations, and there's historical capacity that isn't being used. So we've seen the proliferation of, let's markets in the Columbus, Ohio region, or parts in the middle of the country. West Texas is becoming a pretty major location for these data centers. Phoenix has really grown. So it's, as we look to where we're headed to where there is this access to the power. As the facilities have changed over the years, that is the main driver. I alluded to a little while ago. I've been doing this for a long period of time. Just to provide some scale to it, back in 2010, 2011, when we did a 1 megawatt or a 2 megawatt or a 3 megawatt data center, those were really big deals. And that was, sort of ensuring development for those companies. We regularly now see 500 megawatts, 400 megawatts, 1 gigawatt. So the size and the scale of these facilities has just been on a hockey stick ramp as the computers and the technology have become so much more advanced. So I think that's an easy way to put it. We need more capacity, and we need it now to ensure the health of our American companies and the groups that are pursuing this AI solution.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about how data centers are assessed. I know it's megawatts. In the commercial real estate world, we're used to price per square foot. And, there's a density component in terms of, how much density and is compacted, if you will, into square footage. Talk to us a little bit about how the valuations of these have changed and are really not similar to anything else that we see.
Yeah, really, really good question. The vocabulary we use in the data center world is very different from the rest of real estate. So most real estate discussions, commercial real estate for sure, is around square footage and lease rates per square foot. The square footage calculation for data centers really doesn't apply like it does across other real estate disciplines. We more today, especially look at power, so megawatts available. So in the historical days, I just talked about the 2010s, we would look at, there used to be 10,000 square feet per 1 megawatt. And that was sort of the standard block, if you will. So you can take that out and multiply it. 100,000 square foot building would be able to use 10 megawatts. What we're seeing now is this densification. So 100,000 square foot building now might have 100 megawatts in it because the computers can be in a much smaller area and they're using much more power. So again, going back to this densification number, 15 years ago, we were at, let's call it 3 to 5 to 6 kilowatts per rack. And if you've seen a picture of a data center, you can see that the equipment are stacked in racks. That could be cooled by air, and it was an easy solution. The current machines that are being deployed are, let's call it 40 to 50 kWs per rack. So the racks are, 10-12% as dense. And as we look towards the future, NVIDIA is, the current machines that are being released by NVIDIA are 140 kilowatts per rack. So then we're 30 times what the historical standard was. And then once you get to those big numbers, you can't cool them. You can't cool the racks anymore with just air. So you need to have liquid, so cold water, if you will, running through the systems to cool down the machines. And NVIDIA at their recent conference, they talked about taking that 140 number much further north of that, the 300s and the 400 kW per rack. So it's really to your point, the densification. So the buildings don't need to be as big as they used to be, but you need to find solutions to cool more power in a smaller area. So when we talk, going back to the original point, when we talk in power, we talk in megawatts, and we're talking about how dense the deployments can be. Does that help?
It does help. Yeah. I'm not a math guy, but I think I got your point that things are much more powerful than when you got into it, and the cooling of the systems is much more pertinent now as well. So speaking of cooling and maybe green technology, why don't you talk to us a little bit about water regulations and how those are becoming important for the development of data centers?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Brian. So historically, data centers have for the cooling towers and for the cooling infrastructure, have used a lot of water. That water has become a more and more scarce resource, especially in the Southwest or in parts of Texas. So solutions have come up with closed loop, if you will. So you have a certain amount of water or a liquid on site that you're able to recycle and reuse over and over. So you're not essentially stressing the water resources of the town or the district where you're located. There are sites up in the northwest or the northeast that are able to access water from river infrastructure, which makes them more efficient. So I think this really dovetails onto a discussion also about who wants data centers. What are the regulations in areas of the country? There's been a lot of publicity about noise regulations. Well, how do we help the machines, dull that noise so it doesn't affect the neighbors? Where do we build these so that we can ensure a more stable grid as opposed to utilizing the power resources that could otherwise, go to municipal reasons and municipal uses for consumers. So as data centers have gotten bigger and more part of the conversation, also we have seen regulations and processes that are more required to build them in your neighborhood and in your area and in your district. So the just like anything, the continual change of development is a challenge, and we will face it, and the regulations will come to pass, and we'll make these things work and hopefully power the next generation of business in the United States.
Great information there, Ryan. Really appreciate your insights here. Let's talk a little bit more about powering data centers, given their immense power usage. What are some of the innovative technologies that companies are employing to power these things?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. So a lot of the technological change and the pursuit of green electrons, if you will, is being driven by the hyperscalers. So the AWS is the Googles of the world. As they have these huge deployments, they obviously have corporate standards on power usage. So we've seen a little bit of a shift nationally, and there's a drive towards green electrons. So there's parts of the United States where power is 99% renewable. I think of the Northeast per se, or places where there's power coming off the rivers or the water. There's places in upstate North Dakota, if you will, that has tons of wind power. West Texas that has wind power and solar power. So there's been a corporate push to go towards green electrons and sort of how we can build around that. And we've seen a little bit of pricing benefit too. So there's a big equation here, and when you occupy a data center, there's a total cost of ownership. There's the rent you pay. There's also the power you consume. So different parts of the country have different power costs. Where I'm sitting in the Silicon Valley, our power costs are in the 14 to 15 cent per kilowatt hour region. In Texas, that number can be 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So when you start running through that math, it turns into tens and dozens of millions of dollars per year just based on the power you're consuming. So there's been a drive towards where can I get cheaper power, but also as I pursue cheaper power, how can I get greener power? The Northwest is a good example where there's lots of hydropower, and that has driven sort of a saturation and growth of those markets as well, because they have a little bit of both. They have power and it's cheap and it's green.
Great. Thanks for that. I did have a question on other property types that are adjacent to data centers. Are you seeing anything notably in the industrial or office sectors increase around the data center development that you're seeing around the country?
Yeah, maybe I'll take that a little bit off topic because you mentioned it earlier, but San Francisco is a good example. So San Francisco, obviously, and the Silicon Valley, the greater Silicon Valley, have always been sort of known as an innovation center. Post-COVID, we've had jumps in activity in the life sciences, and we've had jumps in activity in industrial. But the current green shoots in our markets have been the growth of AI companies. So young, venture-backed companies that want to be in an innovative market with high-skilled engineers and employees have really changed the landscape in San Francisco, where San Francisco was a little bit slow and struggling to find their footing. We've seen some very large leases from the likes of the OpenAIs of the world and sort of these new companies that are taking, chunks of 50, 100,000 square feet throughout the Silicon Valley that are really changing. So in terms of the adjacencies that you mentioned of data centers, there's a driver on the back end, and that's the technological development that is driving the need for these data centers. So locally, it's been a very stabilizing force and hopefully a growth engine for our general markets in the future.
And are you seeing this growth also occur in some of the burgeoning data center markets like Columbus, Ohio, and even West Texas, which people probably don't think of as a technology center, in Phoenix that you mentioned?
Yeah. So, that's one of the, so multiple part answer to that question. That's one of the challenges that you hear a lot is that data centers don't have a ton of employees on site. The employees that are there are highly trained engineers and they're technological people, but you might not, for a large build, you might not need as many as you would think you would need, as opposed to an office facility or a production supply chain type location. But what we're also seeing is those communities that are a little more tertiary or secondary markets, those are good jobs. They're good jobs, and there's good people that are needed to fulfill the data center requirements. So data centers themselves may not employ a ton of people, but the jobs that are there are great jobs. So the engineering side and the engineers and the training needed for these facilities is definitely a requirement.
Another question I had, just out of curiosity, you have these large facilities with so much important uh, stuff going on. I think about security and the need for increased cybersecurity and physical security from threats unknown. Talk to us a little bit about security in data centers.
Yeah, 100%. Data security is the top of a lot of discussions. We do a little bit of international work as well, and that's there's a lot of Asia Pac questions that come into play there, and the data security of the growing countries there, and the same thing in EMEA. So it's the top of everyone's mind. It's the top of everyone's thought process, where that data lives and how secure it is, and that there's no ability to sort of access it. From a physical side, the typical data center is built with fences around the outside and security, and security personnel always on site. When you check into a data center, you need to show IDs and sort of walk through man traps, if you will, so you can't sort of access other people's space. So both from the physical and the technological side, yeah, security is a foremost thought in everyone's minds.
Ryan, before we wrap up here, is there any other interesting nuggets that you'd like to share with the audience about data centers or the future?
Interesting nuggets. One thing I come back to a lot is the historical facilities. Historically, real estate moves somewhat slowly. The technology is moving much quicker than the infrastructure. So as we look to the next steps and where we're headed in this process, the buildings that exist today will need to be upgraded, and the new buildings that are built today, if it takes, let's call it 2 to 3 years to go from a nice land site to your entitlements, to construction, to development, to completion, in those 3 years, what has changed on the technology side? We mentioned it briefly with NVIDIA and their conferences, and they continue to roll out new machines and new, more powerful machines. Over those 3 years, if we take a look at just a historical benchmark like Moore's Law, where are we going to be in 3 years with that facility? When it comes out of the ground, is it still going to be up to date and to current standards? So just the pace of change is going to be a constant challenge for the developers and the owners of the real estate, the actual physical infrastructure real estate.
Yeah, great point. Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time on the segment today. It's great to have you, and maybe we'll have you back next year for an update on the topic.
I would like to do that. I will, if current things hold. I don't know if maybe we'll talk in some sort of cyber hologram land as we maybe we could be in the same room but not actually physically there together. So I don't know. It really is a dynamic industry, and it's fun. It's fun every day to see what's changing and hear the stories, but it's moving real fast, and it provides a great challenge for us at JLL day by day to keep up and do a good job for our clients.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing with us today, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of 5x5 with CompStak. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Not Podcast podcast, and you can find all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn for more information about new episodes and when they'll drop.